She wasn't supposed to be out that far, not with storm warnings pulsing across the scanner every hour, but curiosity had always overruled caution. The terrain was unlike anything she'd seen before: murky green swamp water, thick mist clinging low, and trees twisted with bioluminescent moss that blinked like a living pulse. Her boots sank with every step, but she pressed forward, tracking unusual life signs her drone had picked up earlier. This planet, still unclassified, had already proven hostile with its venomous insects and spore clouds, but what caught her attention now was something else: an erratic, rapid pulse pattern coming from the reeds ahead. She moved cautiously, parting the foliage. That's when she saw it, a small figure flailing in the muddy water, its cries almost drowned in the sloshing. At first glance, it looked like a pup, but not of any Earth species. Its fur was matted with algae and blood, limbs twitching weakly, gills fluttering uselessly under the jawline. Its eyes, 4 of them, were glossy with terror. The translator chip couldn't identify it. The scanner, however, lit up red. Predatory species. Caution advised. Still, she moved. Slowly. No sudden gestures. The pup choked as it sank again, unable to keep its head above the viscous surface. Without hesitation, she dropped her pack, waded in, and pulled it free. Its claws reflexively dug into her jacket, but the grip was weak. It didn't fight, just whimpered, a wet, guttural sound as if it had given up moments before she arrived. She wrapped it in thermal fabric and backed out toward higher ground. The pup trembled, gasping with each breath. One leg bent awkwardly. She scanned again: minor fractures, malnourished, dehydrated. The data meant nothing to her emotionally. What mattered was the way it looked at her, not just as an alien, but with raw, animal fear laced with something else: confusion. As if asking why she had pulled it out at all. Back inside her shelter pod, she activated the medgel patch and placed it carefully over its chest. The creature flinched but didn't resist. She whispered, not words it would understand, but a tone of calm. Her voice was steady, her hands careful. She had worked on injured wildlife before, but this wasn't training. This was instinct. Hours passed. The storm finally broke, rain pelting the reinforced dome. The pup lay curled in the corner now, barely moving but alive. She offered protein gel, and after several failed attempts, it licked at it. No gratitude. Just survival. That was enough for her. She examined the readings again. Its biology was closer to canids than reptiles. Internal organs hinted at higher intelligence, possibly pack-based. Still, it had been alone. Abandoned or left behind? Judging by the wounds and the exhaustion, she suspected the latter. Nature was cruel on this world, and if this was a pack species, then weakness likely equaled death. But that idea unsettled her. Even the most brutal predators protected their young, for a time. She couldn't understand the logic of leaving a pup to drown unless it had been intentional. Her gut twisted at the thought. By the second day, it no longer cowered when she approached. It didn't come closer either, just watched. Alert now, wary, but not aggressive. She gave it space. Names popped into her head, but she didn't voice them. Not yet. The pup growled once during the night, low and trembling, staring into the shadows. She activated the perimeter scan. Nothing. But it didn't calm down until she moved closer, positioning herself between the entrance and the pup. Its eyes tracked her as she stood guard for hours. Something passed between them in that moment, nothing verbal, but understood. By the third morning, it limped across the shelter toward her without prompting. Not close enough to touch, but closer than before. She finally spoke aloud. "You're still alive," she said quietly. "So don't waste it." The pup blinked. Its head tilted, ears flattening. Later that day, the first faint echo of a howl rippled through the air. She froze, listening. The pup did too. Its entire body stiffened. Another howl answered. Distant, but unmistakable. A call, and a warning. She looked down at it. Its breathing quickened. She didn't know what the pack would do if they found it alive. But she knew one thing already. She wasn't giving it back. The pup recovered faster than expected. Its limp remained, but its posture straightened, muscles filling out, eyes sharper each day. It no longer whimpered or shied away. Instead, it tracked her movements with quiet intensity, ears flicking at every sound outside the shelter. She noticed its instincts, how it always positioned itself near an exit, how it never fully slept when she did, always half alert. There was no gratitude, only awareness. It wasn't domestic, and she didn't try to make it so. She observed, learned. She started calling it Knox, not out of sentiment, but practicality. It responded eventually, not with affection, but attention. When she tossed rations, it caught them midair. When she moved, it mirrored. When she rested, it stood guard. It never barked or whined. It communicated through movement, posture, and breath. She respected that. Words weren't needed. Her database finally cross-referenced the species. Knox belonged to a predator pack native to the planet's northern bioregions. Aggressive. Hierarchical. Survivors of brutal selection. Pups deemed unfit were often discarded, not as punishment but ritual. The weak diluted the pack. Mercy was weakness. Protection was earned, not given. She stared at the report, the clinical breakdown of what Knox was and what he'd been subjected to. The fact that he was still alive said something. So did the scars on his flank. When she scanned him again, she found evidence of bite marks, other juveniles likely. Probably driven into the swamp as part of exile. Not all packs killed directly. Some let the world do it. Nature was efficient here. At night, the howls grew louder. Not cries, but signals. Territory calls, threat warnings, assertion. Knox heard them too, and though he stiffened, he never replied. He didn't pace or whimper. He simply listened, still as stone, waiting. She wondered if he recognized the voices, former packmates, a littermate, maybe even the one who tried to kill him. But he never approached the shelter's edge. She strengthened the barrier field. Not for herself. She'd faced worse. But Knox didn't stand a chance if they returned and saw him as unfinished business. The idea infuriated her, not just the threat, but the indifference. She didn't believe in throwing the weak away. He hadn't asked to be rescued, but now that he was in her care, that responsibility was hers. Knox followed her farther each day when she foraged. He moved silently, head low, body tense, eyes scanning constantly. Not for food, but for signs of threat. He was adapting, but not forgetting. That wasn't trauma. It was training burned into bone. During one of their walks, she noticed something. He started flanking her, not trailing. When she stopped, he stepped forward. When she crouched, he mirrored. His actions weren't passive. He wasn't just following. He was learning her rhythm, anticipating her decisions. The bond wasn't emotional, it was strategic. Mutual trust, not affection. Still, there were moments. When she passed him a protein strip, he took it gently now. No teeth. When she touched his side to apply another med patch, he didn't recoil. She noticed him lying closer each night. Not touching, but no longer separated by space. The invisible line had moved. Then one morning, tracks appeared near the perimeter. Large, clawed, and deliberate. Not random movement, scouting. She checked the scanners. Something had circled twice, then stopped just beyond detection range. Watching. Waiting. The readings matched adult pack members. More than one. She looked at Knox. He hadn't moved. His eyes fixed on the same direction. He had known before the scanner did. He didn't growl, didn't flee. He braced. As if he expected confrontation and had already accepted its outcome. That night, she cleaned her rifle and set extra power cells near the doorway. Knox remained by the back wall, eyes never closing. Not fear. Readiness. She finally spoke again, not because she needed to, but because she couldn't not. They're coming. No response. But his breathing slowed, steady. Like hers. This wasn't a pet she had saved. This was a survivor she had interrupted. He hadn't needed her kindness. He'd already accepted death. That she intervened didn't change who he was, but it changed what he would become. And in that quiet space between survival and loyalty, something was forming neither of them understood yet. They arrived without warning. No sound, no tremors, no distant howls, just sudden presence. The motion sensor flared once before cutting out, interference clouding the perimeter. She was already moving, grabbing the rifle, locking the shelter's external seals. Knox was standing rigid, muscles coiled, gaze locked toward the east. His silence said everything. He knew them. Through the translucent shield she spotted them. Not animals. Organized. 5 figures, each larger than Knox, armored with thick hides, moving in practiced formation. One at the front, taller, broader, exuding dominance without needing to prove it. The Alpha. They didn't charge. They watched. Assessing. Their posture wasn't immediately hostile. But it wasn't friendly either. Challenge hung in the air. She opened the external comms. Static. Deliberate jamming. The lead wolf stepped forward, raising its head. Its voice cracked through her translator. Return what is not yours. She didn't move. Rifle aimed low, finger resting near the trigger. Knox remained behind her, silent. The words didn't surprise her. The timing did. They had waited, observed. This was a pack response, not revenge. They came to reclaim what they deemed lost, property, not kin. I saved him, she said flatly. The lead snarled. You interfered. He was tested. He failed. Her eyes narrowed. You abandoned a child. He was judged. She stepped forward, just enough to show she wouldn't hide. He didn't die. He survived. The pack shifted, murmurs passing between them in guttural tones. One of the flank wolves lowered its head slightly. Not submission, consideration. The Alpha spoke again. He is nothing to us. Then leave, she replied. No, it growled. Your act shames the pack. He lives because of you. That changes his fate. She wasn't sure if that was threat or tradition. It didn't matter. She wasn't handing him over. Not to be executed for surviving differently. She adjusted her stance, her voice low and firm. Then change your rules. For the first time, real tension rippled through them. The Alpha's ears flicked. One of the others paced in a small circle, agitated. You protect the weak, the Alpha said. You stand before the strong. I protect those I choose, she replied. That includes him. The silence stretched. Knox growled quietly, stepping beside her. Not behind. Not hidden. Present. That action changed everything. One of the pack lunged, breaking formation. She fired instantly. The plasma bolt struck near its feet, a warning. The wolf skidded to a halt, but the damage was done. The standoff collapsed into chaos. 2 wolves flanked her shelter, probing for openings. The Alpha advanced directly. She stepped between it and Knox, firing again, this time hitting the ground closer. The message was clear. One more step, and she wouldn't miss. The Alpha halted. Its chest heaved, nostrils flared, fangs bared. But it didn't attack. It studied her, gaze flicking between her and Knox. She didn't blink. Neither did Knox. Another wolf barked something low. The Alpha growled back. More words, more tension. Then, without further warning, the Alpha raised its head and howled. A long, deep note that echoed across the swamp. The others responded in kind, their tones lower, reverent. Not directed at her. At him. Knox answered. His howl was not the frightened yelp of a cast-off pup. It was measured. Clear. A declaration. The Alpha stepped back. Not far. Just one stride. It tilted its head, then turned. The others hesitated, then followed. One lingered, staring at her, then at Knox. Its expression unreadable. Then it too disappeared into the mist. She didn't lower her weapon until every signature vanished. Knox remained by her side, tense but still. He had stood his ground. Not behind her. Not as a rescued creature. As an equal. For the first time, she realized he had not been waiting for rescue that day in the swamp. He had accepted his fate. Her act hadn't saved a victim. It had interrupted a trial. And now, the pack had seen him survive something they did not expect: compassion. That changed the rules. The days that followed were quiet, but not settled. Knox kept watch longer at night, posture rigid, ears tuned to sounds she couldn't hear. He didn't leave the shelter's range, yet his presence had changed. He no longer shadowed her. He moved with her. When she ventured out to gather supplies, he took point without waiting for instruction, scanning ahead with careful calculation. His movements were efficient, tactical, the gait of something that had faced death and returned different. She noticed more changes. He stopped reacting to distant howls. No tension, no flinch, only measured silence. Something had shifted after the standoff, an internal decision. He no longer listened like an outcast seeking approval. He listened like a wolf gauging former rivals. His identity no longer aligned with what he had been born into. Her systems continued tracking subtle pack movement in the surrounding area. Proximity sensors flickered irregularly, as if someone was testing their limits, staying just outside range. They weren't gone. They were watching. Maybe studying her, maybe observing Knox. She didn't care. The message had been delivered. He hadn't been reclaimed. He had chosen. Repairs on her transport resumed. The escape pod was still grounded from the initial crash that had stranded her here. Each day, she made progress, patching fuel lines, running diagnostics, re-establishing uplink protocols. Knox stayed near but never interfered. Occasionally, he would sit beside the engine core as if sensing that her focus had shifted. He didn't like the change. She understood that. One evening, as she adjusted the coolant systems, she felt eyes on her. Not hostile, not challenging. Just watching. She looked up. Knox sat with his head tilted, studying her hands, the wires, the tools. She motioned toward the opened access panel. Curious? He blinked slowly. Then, to her surprise, stepped closer and sniffed near the exposed circuitry. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if trying to learn the pattern of her work. She let him. They shared the silence, one working, the other observing, not as human and animal, but as two survivors understanding each other's purpose. Later that night, she noticed Knox had dragged a broken sensor array near the shelter entrance. She hadn't seen where he found it. He simply placed it in her path and sat back, watching. She picked it up, inspected it, then smiled faintly. Helping now? He huffed once, short and quiet. Almost like a reply. That was the moment she understood fully. He wasn't just adapting to her routines. He was integrating them into his own sense of logic. He'd seen tools used to improve survival. He recognized value in tasks beyond instinct. That same night, something unexpected happened. He brought food to her. Not scavenged remains, but freshly killed swamp game, small, reptilian, fast. Something he had hunted alone. He laid it near her meal kit without sound, then walked away. Not as tribute, but recognition. Contribution. For the first time, they were acting like a unit. The transformation wasn't sudden. It was built on hundreds of small, wordless exchanges. When she moved tools, he would nose over dropped components. When she checked atmospheric filters, he would sniff the output. His senses complemented her technology. Neither tried to dominate. Each adapted. It became clear he was no longer waiting to leave. He wasn't looking for his old pack. He wasn't measuring her kindness anymore. He had accepted this new bond, not as subservience, but as mutual respect. Whatever the pack had tried to define him as, failure, cast-off, liability, no longer applied. Then came the test. A minor tremor destabilized one of the fuel tanks. Alarms flared. She rushed to seal the leak, her hands slick with coolant and heat, systems sparking. One wrong move and the pod could ignite. As she worked, she became aware of movement behind her. Knox, calm, unflinching, nosed the emergency release valve she couldn't reach. It clicked into place. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. That night, she wrote the first log she had in weeks. Not a distress call. Not a mission update. Just one sentence. I'm no longer alone here. She looked over. Knox had curled beside the entryway, facing outward, watching the jungle. Guarding. He wasn't just surviving now. He was protecting. The call came just before dawn. A priority signal piercing the static she'd lived under for months. A human rescue cruiser had entered orbit, scanning for her emergency beacon. Systems she thought were beyond repair flickered to life. Her repairs had mattered. Extraction was finally within reach. She stood still as the message repeated, eyes locked on the small comms screen, breath slow. Knox sat behind her, unmoving. He sensed the shift. She didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful in leaving something that had redefined her. Her mission had failed long ago, the colony ruined, her research irrelevant now. But what she'd found in the wreckage had become far more vital than the assignment. He wasn't part of the original objective, but he'd become the reason she'd endured. The cruiser's ETA was just under 12 hours. She began dismantling her camp with precise movements. Not rushed. Not distracted. She packed only essentials, navigation data, medical supplies, a single toolkit. She left behind everything she could replicate later. Weight mattered. But every few minutes, her eyes drifted to Knox. He followed her silently, watching her organize, watching her hesitate. When she reached for the final item, the emergency pod's flight harness, he stepped forward. Not urgently, but deliberately. She paused. He stared at her, unblinking. Then he turned and walked to the edge of the shelter field. She understood. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was a decision. He would not board the ship. He belonged here, and he knew it. The jungle, the silence, the challenge of survival, it wasn't just instinct. It was identity. She had changed him, yes, but she hadn't rewritten him. He had evolved, but never abandoned who he was. She followed him to the tree line. The place where, months ago, she had pulled a dying creature from the mud. Now he stood tall, scarred but whole, his posture steady, his gaze vast. She crouched slowly, not reaching, not commanding. Just existing beside him for one last moment. His head dipped slightly. Not submission. Recognition. The same tilt he gave the pack leader that day, the one he had refused to follow. "You're not mine," she whispered. "But you were never theirs either." He remained silent. But his breath was calm. No tremble, no uncertainty. When the cruiser landed, dust swirling across the clearing, she turned to face the ramp alone. Her steps were slow, deliberate. Every meter forward felt heavier than the last. She didn't look back until she reached the base of the entry hatch. He was still there. A lone shadow against the green. Not following. Just watching. She raised one hand. A farewell, not an invitation. He didn't move. But his ears twitched once in response. The ramp closed. The engines rose. The world below became smaller. Inside the ship, the crew swarmed her with questions, medical scans, debriefings, systems checks. She answered with clipped words, mechanical accuracy. They praised her survival. Commended her resilience. She heard it all as noise. 3 days later, as the ship cruised toward the nearest orbital station, she filed her report. Her logs were clean. Nothing sensational. No embellishment. Just facts. But she added a final entry, a file with no classification, no official seal. Personal archive only. She titled it, Subject Knox. Status alive. Location, Sector 19 Jungle Core. Classification unaligned. She uploaded the coordinates and locked the file behind a private encryption key. Not for secrecy. For protection. If someone found it years later, let them see the data, but not the value. That knowledge belonged to her. Months passed. She returned to duty, reassigned to a more populated sector. The noise of civilization returned. Crowds. Missions. political briefings. Her status shifted from survivor to specialist. But something never adjusted. Her ears still tuned for silence. Her instincts never fully left the jungle. And on the quietest nights, when the stars stretched endless outside the viewport, she would close her eyes and remember not the crash, not the failure, but the moment a wild creature chose to stay wild, even when offered safety. Not because he hated her world, but because he had found the strength to define his own. She hadn't saved him. She had simply witnessed his return.